Hello and welcome to today's module on Masculinity-Femininity An Overview under the broad theme Constructing Gender. Now, I am Vijayalakshmi Barara, Associate Professor from Center for Manipur Studies, Manipur University. I welcome you to this module that deals with conceptualization as well as issues involving facets of masculinity and femininity in a given society. Now, after studying this module, you shall be able to, number one, understand the construction of masculine and feminine within the broad framework of gender studies. Secondly, you can discern the imbibed traits of masculine and the feminine. Then you can learn how the binaries are constructed as hierarchical and opposing categories through a dominant hegemonic pedagogy illustrated through Western societies. Another thing you can learn is incorporate indigenous knowledge systems which profess inclusive, harmonious and egalitarian relationship of the male and the female principles illustrated through Eastern and Native Americans' idea of male and female. Now, lastly, you can understand the issues of masculine and feminine is a complex issue, and our understanding has to go beyond binaries towards the androgeneity to bring an amalgamation of two gender roles. So, with this I will start my today's class. Now, gender, as I have mentioned in my earlier modules on theories of gender, refers to the social roles and relationships between men and women. This includes different responsibilities for women and different responsibilities for men in different cultures and locations. The gender roles of women and men are socially constructed and therefore can change with the change in time and vary according to the geographical location and social contexts. Now, in gender studies, the term gender is used to refer to the social and cultural constructions of masculine and feminines. It does not refer to biological differences, but rather cultural differences. Now, gender is socially constructed, as I told you, which means that it is determined by our social, cultural, psychological surroundings and environments. It is not innate in the same way that our biology is believed to be. Gender is how society view men and women and who they expect them to behave, act, dress, move around, etc. Now, these expectations are how gender gets constructed. Gender is variable and can change from time to time, culture to culture, subculture to subculture. The roles, behavior and expectation for males and females in a given society are governed by many rules about what men and women can or should do or cannot or shouldn't do that have nothing to do with the way their bodies are formed or built. Gender has both privileges and burdens. But this facet that gender is social construction came only in 20th century feminist theories where they developed the concept of gender as a social construction. Before that, gender roles were assigned according to one's genital or the biology of birth. Gender roles were indistinguishable from sex roles in that time. In their effort to upfront women, they built on two strategies. They started writing books on heroic, saintly, learned and otherwise exemplary women. In another strategy, they assert by raising the image of women rather than lowering the image of men. 20th century liberal feminism continued the tradition of seeking for women the privileges already enjoyed by men. Betty Friedan and the National Organization for Women, founded in 1966, believed that changing laws and educating people against erroneous prejudices would remedy gender discrimination, giving women equal opportunity with men to exercise individual choices in life. They sought gender equity through changes in law and childhood socialization. Now, let me talk about femininity and masculinity. Femininity is the qualities and characteristics considered appropriate for women and girls, and masculinity is the qualities and characteristics considered appropriate for men and boys. There are at least three major theories that explain the development of femininity and masculinity. Psychoanalytical theory, which was propounded by Freud, cognitive development theory by Kohlberg, and learning theories that emphasize direct reinforcement by Weizmann, and modeling Michel theory. In all of these theories, a two-part process is involved. In the first part, the child comes to know that she or he is a female or male. In the second part, the child comes to know what is being a female and what is being a male in terms of masculinity or femininity. According to psychoanalytical theory, one's gender identity develops through identification with the same sex parent. Now, this identification emerges out of the conflict inherent in the Oedipal stage of psychosexual development. By about age 3, a child develops a strong sexual attachment to the opposite sex parent. Simultaneously, negative feeling emerges for the same sex parent that is rooted in resentment and jealousy. By age 6, the child resolves the psychic conflict between relinquishing desires for the opposite sex parent and identifying with the same sex parent. Thus, boys come to learn masculinity from their fathers and girls learn femininity from their mothers. Now, the socialization process takes on the ideal of what it is to be masculine. It is called hegemonic masculinity. It does not allow the scope for multiple ideas of masculinity. Now, hegemonic masculinity is defined as the current configuration of practice that legitimizes men's dominant position in the society and which justifies the subordination of women and other marginalized ways of being a man. Conceptually, hegemonic masculinity proposes to explain how and why men maintain dominant social roles over women and other gender identities, which are perceived as feminine in a given society. As a sociological concept, the hegemonic nature of hegemonic masculinity derives from the theory of cultural hegemony by Marxist theorist Antonio Gramsci, which analyzes the power relations among the social classes of a society. The conceptual beginning of hegemonic masculinity represents the culturally idealized form of manhood that was socially and hierarchically exclusive and concerned with the breadwinning that was anxiety provoking and differentiated internally and hierarchically, that was brutal and violent, pseudo-natural and tough, psychologically contradictory and thus crisis prone, economically rich and socially sustained. There is another gender for whom even social roles are not defined, the transgender community. Now, the term gender role was first coined by John Money in 1955 in this very context. During the course of his study of intersex individuals to describe the manners in which these individuals express their status as male or female in a situation where no clear biological assignment existed. It is the biology by birth which is in conflict with the psychology of growing up, and hence the need fell for the change in biology. Society at large does not understand them. They are treated as aberration. They are then become victims of acute marginalization. Therefore, as a gender expert, it is important to include them in building any framework for gender study. It is called a queer study, which is in the field of gender studies that emerged in the early 1990s, combining gay, lesbian and feminist studies. Gerard Campbell claims to be heavily influenced by the work of Michel Foucault as well as by Jacques Derrida and other deconstructionists. According to him, queer theory builds both upon feminist challenges to the idea that gender is part of the essential self and upon gay lesbian studies. close examination of the socially constructed nature of sexual acts and identities. Now, queer theory, unlike some feminist theories and studies, include a wide array of previously considered non-normative sexualities and sexual practices in its list of identities. Queer study is grounded in gender and sexuality, and therefore, there is a debate as to whether sexual orientation is natural or essential, or if it is merely a construction and subject to change. There is a problem of classifying every individual by gender. Therefore, queer is a critique of gender identity and, like feminist theories, questioning the binaries. In the study of Japanese youth, the term feminine is used outside of phallic-centric discourse, where both men and women move away from their ascribed roles and into the counter-hegemonic practices those challenge conventional masculine values. Now, Yumiko's study states that these changes are giving rise to subjective feminine gaze to which young men are responding with efforts to redefine masculinity. The author's contention is that the increase in gender ambiguity is creating a conducive ethos and space for the feminist goal of transgressing patriarchy. Among the Japanese young men, it is not the desire to look like women, but a rejection of the hegemonic masculine idea which is imposed on them. The Japanese women, according to the study, have moved from 3 H's: high salary, high educational credentials and high physical status, to 3 C's: comfortable, cooperative and communicative. They are what Yumiko Lida explains as feminization of masculinity, which is a logical outcome of feminization of culture in the postmodern cultural conditions where human bodies are transformed into visual representational surfaces. Now, the image of a happy homemaker, naturally designed to be mother, ready to serve one and all, subservient, etc. All these characteristics are seen to be naturally endowed on women. For a very long time, we have been ingrained into the binaries of men are from Mars and women are from Venus syndrome. Men are rational, women are emotional, men are strong, women are weak, etc. Where are these fixed notions of binaries coming from? Many sociologists have built on the nature-culture debate to explain the gender relations and gender stereotypes in a given society. Now, nature, culture, mind, body being directly synonym with man, women, implying that nature is otherwise wild, needs to be controlled and subjugated. Mind and reason are superior to the emotions and senses and divorced from one another. Man is mind and represents culture, the rational, unified thinking subject. Woman is body, represent nature, irrational, emotional and driven by instinct and physical need. Now, mind, culture, man must harness and control this potentially unruly body, nature, women through the application of knowledge and willpower. There was a time when women's brains were actually considered smaller, hence deficient in the sense of justice and reasoning ability required of all life to be in the care of husband and children. It was almost like a teleological fact that women naturally prefer to be protected by a powerful man. So, what are the typical characteristics of masculinity and those of femininity? Masculinity and femininity are abstract concepts based on gender, with the expectation that male will be masculine and female will be feminine. Examples of stereotypical masculine attributes include independence, aggression, strength, competitiveness. Stereotypical feminine attributes include nurturing, caring, passivity, subordination. Some people expect that women will take care of children, cook and clean the house, while men will take care of finances, repair the car and other gadgets. There are people who are quick to assume that teachers are nurses and women and pilots, doctors and engineers are men. A recent study was conducted by 3 scholars on the masculine and feminine traits of male and female nurses in America. The masculinity-femininity difference scores showed that male nursing students were significantly more masculine on balance than female nursing students, who showed a non-significant trend towards less masculinity when compared with male students who were not nursing majors. The same was true of female nursing students when compared with females of other majors. The idea is that stereotypical feminine attributes as being sympathetic and sensitive to the needs of others can be attributes of a man without necessarily indicating a deficiency of masculinity. Similarly, a female pilot can be as attentive and good navigator without indicating deficiency of her femininity. The Hugh Sword maidens of, for example, combine the concept of fighting women of great beauty who hail from the areas of North Vietnam and its neighboring Chinese regions. Today, women are getting enlisted in army and armed wings of the organizations. 40,000 US women were deployed to the Middle East during the Gulf War. Now, I often play this puzzle with my students. One day, a child had a birthday. The parent of the child decided to bake a cake, while the other, who was a truck driver, promised to reach punctually at 6 p.m. While they were waiting, the news came that the truck driver's truck broke down and it will take some time to reach home. So, the question is, who among the parent is mother and who is father? Now, majority of my students said that the one who was baking is a mother and the one who was truck driver is a father. Now, I did not indicate anywhere in my story about the sex of the baker and the sex of the truck driver. Why couldn't we think that the truck driver can be a mother and the one baking the cake can be a father? Such deep rooted are our notions of masculine and feminine roles that we presume these roles to be natural. This is called gender stereotypical thinking. This kind of conditioning promotes people to try to enter into the specific given established gender roles. A gender stereotype consists of beliefs about psychological traits and characteristics of as well as the activities appropriate to men or women. Gender roles are defined by behaviors, but gender stereotypes are beliefs and attitudes about masculinity and femininity. The concepts of gender roles and gender stereotypes tend to be related. When people associate a pattern of behavior with either women and men, they may overlook individual variation and expectation and come to believe that the behavior is invariably associated with one gender but not the other. Therefore, gender roles furnish the material for gender stereotypes. Gender stereotypes are very influential. They affect conceptualization of women and men and establish rigid social categories for gender. According to Hofstede, masculinity stands for a society in which social gender roles are clearly distinct. Men are supposed to be assertive, tough and focused on material success. Women are supposed to be more modest, tender and concerned with quality of life. Now, femininity stands for a society in which social gender roles overlap. Both men and women are supposed to be modest, tender and concerned with the quality of life. In such a long trajectory of subjective thinking, the Japanese society's process of feminization of masculinity is a welcome development. What do you think? Today, we are seeing families where husband is deciding to be at home and look after the children and maintain the house, while the wives are working out. Remember the Hindi movie Ka and Ki? Then we are having families with two gay partners with adopted children, where the role of mother and father is picked up voluntarily. Then there are families of single parents where the role of mother and father are subsumed. The point is that why at all there should be a specified roles of mother and a father? The basic social fact is that a child needs the supervision, affection and care from responsible adults in the society for making them happy and responsible adults. A lot of water has flown since we recited the poem in Hindi, Mama ki roti gol gol, Papa ka paisa gol gol, Mama's chapatis are round and Papa's money is round. Today one can say that dono Mama Papa ki roti bhi gol and paisa bhi gol. Both Mama Papa's chapatis are round and also money is round. Now, let me talk a little bit about binaries. Now, studies on children in the US have found that children only able to detect the gender of other children when they are culturally stereotypic makers of their gender, including hairstyle, makeup and clothing. Now, throughout history of US, until the victories of the Stonewall riots, Stonewall riots were a victory for lesbian people. Now, it was illegal to not conform to the assigned sex at birth in public settings. Pink if it's girl and blue if it's boy is another Western notion adopted by world over. The gender toys like dolls for girls and toys for boys or toy trucks for boys are very apparent and obvious examples. The whole market of consumer products enforces the gender divide, dictating people to buy according to their gender identity. Recently, a trend is building towards gender neutral clothing, whereby one can buy a pink shirt for men and women can buy a unisex sunglasses, for instance. But it is yet to enter the children's clothing and play materials. Even today, we will consider it abnormal for a small boy, for example, if he is showing interest in nail paints. The parents will get worried, the society will make fun. Similarly, if a girl shows aggressive behavior and wants to play with the toy guns, there is a term tomboy describing her. As I have already discussed earlier that over a period of time gender roles are overlapping, masculinity is diffusing into femininity and femininity is amalgamating into the masculine. There is also a need to go beyond binaries in two consecutive manners. Firstly, one needs to understand that many cultures accept that non-opposing, non-hierarchical entities, rather seeing them as complementary to each other. And secondly, there are cultures who understand and accept the notion of multiple identities going beyond masculinity and femininity. So, therefore, firstly, we need to look towards the east of the world, also towards the indigenous perceptions world over. I have already mentioned the examples of Japan in Yumiko Lida's study of feminization or masculinity. We need to take another Japanese concept of yin and yang. The yin and yang represent all the opposite principles one finds in the universe. Under yang are the principles of maleness, the sun, creation, heat, light, heaven and so on. And under the yin are the principle of femaleness, the moon, completion, cold, darkness, material forms and so on. Each of these opposites produce the other. Heaven creates the idea of things under yang, the earth produces their material form under yin and vice versa. Creation occurs under the principle of yang. The completion of the created things occurs under the yin and vice versa and so on. The production of yin from yang and yang from yin occurs cyclically and constantly, so that no one principle continuously dominates the other or determines the other. It is this non-hierarchical aspect of yin and yang which makes it different from the Western notion of male and female principles as binary opposites. The yin and yang principle, also called unity, integration or polarity, holds that a person is born with both masculine and feminine traits. A man supposedly could have been a man 250 times and a woman 250 times in previous incarnations, and the memory of those past life experiences are said to remain as indelible traces of consciousness. Thus, we are each a combination of male and female, masculine and feminine. The new age encourages children and adults to appreciate and practice the harmony of opposites, teaching the individual to merge the two selves, man and women. Similarly, in the Methi cosmogenesis of Manipur, the principles of Pa and Pi, the supreme male and female principles, Atinkog, the infinite expanse, which embraces all within him, and Amamba, the supreme infinite darkness, combined into one, are the starting points of all manifestations. Now, this principle is based on copulation of Sky Father, Atiya, and Mother Earth, Malem. Therefore, all the creatures are combination of masculinity and femininity, and the important message is to keep a balance between the two. The fertility principle being the primal force, the male and female aspects thus become only two elements behind the energy of fecundity, which is complementary, non-hierarchical. In the Eastern notion, therefore, there is no binary, and instead we understand that every male and every female has both femininity, masculinity within them, and this is how we understand ourselves, our bodies, our cosmos and our society. Such an open notion of gender self, to quote Yumiko again, is conducive to building a society with greater understanding, sympathy, creativity, exploratory spirit and opening of imagination, and more peaceful and less violent. Therefore, one can notice that the Eastern world is good in performing arts, are creative weavers, martial artists, both men and women, and these societies have greater acceptance towards trans identities. Now, in my understanding, for the need to go beyond boundaries, the second element to incorporate in our epistemology is the indigenous cultures that understand that accept the notion of multiple identities, going beyond masculinity and femininity. Now, let me take example of Native Americans. Native Americans have often held intersex, androgynous people, feminine males and masculine females in high respect. The most common term to define such persons today is to refer to them as two-spirited people. Since everything that exists is thought to come from the spirit world, androgynous or transgender persons are seen as doubly blessed, having both the spirit of man and the spirit of a woman. Thus, they are honored for having two spirits and are seen as more spiritually gifted than the typical masculine male or female. Therefore, many Native American religions, rather than stigmatizing such persons, often look to them as religious leaders and teachers. But due to the contact with the white Christian settlers, the Native Americans too started feeling, homophobic initially during early 20th century. At that time, according to Williams, two-spirit people were often forced either by government officials or Christian missionaries or their own community to conform to standard gender roles. Some who could not conform either went underground or even committed suicide. With the imposition of Euro-American marriage laws, same-sex marriages between two-spirit people and their spouses were no longer legally recognized. But with the revitalization of Native American red power, they are also called red Indians, it should not be called like that, but red power, cultural pride since the 60s and the rise of gay and the lesbian liberation movement at the same time, a new respect for androgyny started slowly re-emerging among American Indian people. Now, Native Americans' same-sex marriage have been used as a model for legalizing same-sex marriage, and the spiritual gifts of androgynous persons have started to become more recognized. Hence, it is predominantly the Western notion of rigid binaries of masculine and feminine which need to be deconstructed through the understanding of indigenous multidimensionality of sexualities. Now, in conclusion, let me say this. Yet, the problem remains, since even in the traditional understanding of gender identity as well as in the modern perception, we still tend to have fixed notion of what traits masculine and feminine ought to be, and reinforces what it is to be male and female. Hence, the problem dealing with masculinity and femininity is complex. Mere acceptance of multisexualities rather than binaries will not resolve the preponderance of hegemonic notions of these two social constructs. One needs to move towards the androcentric world where we see a father baking the cake and the mother driving a truck while remaining in their own masculine and feminities. One can remain in masculine trait and still bake a cake, and similarly one can remain in feminine trait and still drive the truck. We should therefore try to build an androgynous society where the gender roles are not defined by biology of the person but through the individual choice. Now, let me recap what I intended to impart through this module on masculinity and femininity an overview. I wanted all of you to understand that issues pertaining to masculinity and femininity are complex. They are rigid binaries with fixed gender roles, gender expectations building into gender stereotypes. But now there is a growing trend towards feminization of masculinity where both men and women are coming out of their stereotypical gender roles. The Japanese example. But we forget that these notions of multiple sexualities and interplay of gender roles are always part of indigenous culture. For example, the Japanese, Manipuri, Native Americans. We should therefore try to build an androgynous society where the gender roles are not defined by the biology of the person but through the individual choice. With the hope that this learning will broaden your understanding towards gender issues and encourage you to take up interesting research in this field, bringing in new insights. I wish each and everyone watching this all the best and happy researching.